Sometimes it's hard for me to decide which stories I like better, the dark and horrible, or the sad and melancholy. That's why we bounce around here so much, but lucky enough for me, both types have a lot of overlap. Today's story hits on the melancholy side of things, a tale of love, a story of the extremes someone would go through for that special person in their life, their willpower and determination. And since you're here watching Dixie After Dark, their lonesome grave, and the spirit that is said to still linger on a particular peak in the Petit Mountains called Petit Jean Mountain. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. Petit Jean Mountain sits inside a cluster of mountains known as the Petit Jean Mountains, on the edge of the Petit Jean River, inside Petit Jean State Park. It would be natural for someone to ask about the name and the multiple uses of it. Even here, this is the point in my style where I'd tell you the history of the name. Well, lucky for you, that's the focus of today's story. There are multiple legends as to how this area got its name, but one stands out amongst the rest. It all goes back to the 1700s and the French exploration of the Louisiana Territory. A young French nobleman named Chevet had requested a claim for land in the New World and was granted it by the King of France, in return for heading an expedition through the area to expand France's colony there. Chevet set out making plans and putting together an exploration team immediately. Excitement was high with everyone associated with Chevet, even with his fiancée, Adrienne Dumont. As a matter of fact, she wanted to go with him, but due to the French laws of the day, the young couple would need to be married first, and this is exactly what Adrienne Dumont proposed, pun intended. But Chevet refused. He was madly in love with Adrienne, but he refused out of the uncertainty of the trip, and for Adrienne's own safety. In his mind, the trip would be too hard on her, and who knows what they would find on the other side of the ocean. He did vow to return though, and then they would be married. And then, if the New World was safe and hospitable, the two of them would return to set up the rest of their lives together. Adrienne Dumont was heartbroken, but she did understand, and she agreed with Chevet, at least on the surface. But secretly, young Adrienne began making expedition plans of her own. As the legend has it, Adrienne disguised herself as a young cabin boy and applied for a position on the ship that Chevet had hired to take them and his team to the New World, and Adrienne got the job. The ship crossed the Atlantic in early spring and made decent time in arriving at the Louisiana Territory around 2 months later. Adrienne Dumont held her own amongst the jobs aboard the ship, and her disguise worked even better. No one ever suspected her of anything other than being a cabin boy, not even Chevet, although she was careful to keep a safe distance from him throughout the trip, struggling with how and when to reveal herself to Chevet. Adrienne had taken the job under the name Jean, and despite her great disguise, her stature was still small, even for a supposed cabin boy, so the crew took to calling her Petit Jean, literally translating to English as Little John. The ship made its way to the ports of the Louisiana Territory, then up the Mississippi River and into the Arkansas River, bound for uncharted lands per Chevet's agreement with the King of France. They made their way up the Arkansas River as far as their ship could safely travel, and eventually set anchor near the foot of a small mountain in an area that was inhabited by natives. The natives came down from the mountain and greeted the French explorers. Ways to break through the language barrier were eventually made, and the natives invited the explorers and crew to spend time with them on the mountain. Chevet was able to make good connections with the tribe and explained his intentions to the fullest, and an agreement to share the land was eventually made, although this did take some time. During this time, though, not only did Adrienne see how much her fiancé loved the land, but she fell in love with the area herself, especially with an overlook area high atop the mountain. Mentally, she claimed this spot for herself and spent all of her free time there alone, imagining the life and family that her and Chevet would have there in the near future. It was at this special spot of hers that she decided not to reveal her identity to Chevet. She had no doubts of his love and loyalty to her, but she was still uncertain as to how he would take her deception. She decided that it may be best to ride out her secret identity until they made it back to France at least, then address things as they played out there. All in all, the French team spent the entire summer on the mountain with the friendly natives, but at the first sign of the seasons changing, plans were made to head back to France with all of their new information, expanded maps, and more importantly, the news of the natives' cooperation. The team of French explorers packed up over the next few days, then moved back fully aboard their ship, ready for departure the next morning. But that night, Adrienne fell sick. Out of nowhere, she suffered from fever, delirium, and convulsions. Things were bad enough that the crew's departure was postponed until she got better. But she never did. Adrienne's condition continued to get worse and worse, and during her care, of course, Petit Jean's true identity was revealed to be that of a female. Adrienne confessed everything to Chevet and begged for his forgiveness. They did everything that they could, Frenchmen and natives alike, but it was a sickness that neither group were familiar with. Adrienne, too, it seemed, knew that all hope was lost. She requested that if she were to die, that she be buried by the overlooked spot that she had grown to love so much. Over the next couple of days, things only got worse, with Adrienne eventually slipping into a coma. Chevet relayed her message to the natives, and they knew the exact spot that Adrienne had referred to. That morning, the tribe convinced Chevet that the time was near. Adrienne was taken ashore, where the natives had crafted a buckskin stretcher, and she was carried to the top of the mountain to her secret overlook spot. There they continued to care for her, but she was dead by sundown. Adrienne Dumont was buried in the very spot that she had chosen, high on the overlook, looking down over a small river. Heartbroken, Chevet and his crew left the area the very next morning. He kept his bargain with the King of France, making it back with all of the information that they had collected on the lands north of the French settlement, thus allowing France to be able to expand the Louisiana Territory further north. But as for Chevet, that was it. He remained in France, never returning to the New World. It was many years before any more French explorers made their way up the Mississippi and into the Arkansas River. But when they did, though, they encountered the same friendly tribe that Chevet and his expedition team had experienced years earlier. Even though communication between the two groups of people were tough at first, it was obvious to the Frenchmen that the natives were open to communication, and that they were familiar with the ways of the Frenchmen. To them, this had to be the same native tribe that Chevet's team had reported back in France upon their return. But it was when the subject changed to the land around them, and the mountain before them in particular, that the Frenchmen were caught off guard. The tribe spoke words that they understood clearly, words in the explorers' own tongue. The natives told the explorers that the name of the mountain was Petit Jean Mountain. Although Chevet had not spoken much about the events surrounding him and Adrienne's ill-fated inclusion in the expedition team, the story was too impactful to the others on the team to keep it completely under wraps. It had spread from sailor to sailor, from explorer to explorer, and now, here they were, 1,000 miles from home, hearing the same story from a different culture of people that should not have any idea of it, much less the French names involved, unless the accounts were true. The natives guided the French explorers to the top of Petit Jean Mountain, to the outlook so loved by Adrienne Dumont, and showed them a small earthen mound, weathered low with age, the grave of Adrienne Dumont herself, who the natives knew as Petit Jean. And the name stuck, even all of these centuries later, although being Americanized over the years from Petit Jean to Petit Jean. Petit Jean Mountain, Petit Jean River, Petit Jean State Park. These names kept the legend of Chevet and Adrienne alive, regardless of whether the account is true or not. Today, the grave can still be seen. The low, solitary grave high atop the Stout's overlook, surrounded by a small iron fence, drawing in visitors from all over, especially those looking for a little romantic flair for their trip. There are other theories and legends attributed to the grave, but the story of Adrienne and Chevet remains the most popular. And it isn't just the repeated name of Petit Jean that keeps the particular legend alive. The legend is aided in that by what some say is sightings of Adrienne Dumont herself. For hundreds of years, and even now into modern times, people reported the ghostly image of a young woman moving silently through the rocks and trees atop Petit Jean Mountain, as well as strange lights reported in the area of her grave. The most popular belief is that Adrienne Dumont lingers around the outlook on Petit Jean Mountain simply because she loved it so much in life. There are no reports of malicious intent, nothing spooky or creepy. Those that have witnessed the spirit of Adrienne Dumont report a feeling and emotion of love, of contentment, and a feeling of peace. It doesn't seem to be the case of a trapped spirit, wandering until some wrong is righted. This one seems to be a case of a spirit simply loving being there. Young couples making the hike to the overlook have witnessed the spirit of Adrienne Dumont in the distance, just watching them. And when eye contact is made, the spirit simply gives a smile of approval, then disappears. Those that have had those sightings view the encounter as a blessing of sorts to their relationship. Young lovers and the romantic types treat the hike as a pilgrimage almost, leaving behind offerings of flowers at the gravesite of Adrienne Dumont. It's a legend that has survived the test of time, one that has cemented itself in the oral history of the region, regardless of the other theories about the gravesite that may crop up from time to time. And for those young lovers that have witnessed the spirit of Adrienne Dumont themselves, the couples that have had the acknowledgement and blessing from the romantic spirit herself, they'll never entertain any of the other legends, nor should they. They know what they saw, and they know what they felt. Who am I to tell them any different?